Hello demons of all sorts, and welcome to another Hazbin Hotel video. This time we're diving into a theory that's been cooking in my head for a while now and is finally ready to be served hot and fresh. It's a bit long, which is why this video will be a two-parter, and within these two parts we are going to form a master theory to answer the big questions currently on the minds of most Helluverse fans. Like, what are Rosie's plans? Why is Lilith in heaven? What happened between her and Lucifer? Why did Alistair disappear at the same time as her? And where does Roo come into all this? In this part, we'll be covering Rosie, a bit of Lilith, and most importantly, Roo. I'll go over who Roo is, what we know about her, respond to a popular fan theory that I disagree with, and finally explain my own theory as to who she is and what she's doing. Starting with some quick context for you newbies, Roo is a character who's been confirmed to exist in the past and present of the Helluverse in a few different places, and is generally acknowledged as the large, overarching villain of the story. As far back as 2019, in a now-deleted Twitter post, Vivienne Medrano shared a drawing of a woman dressed in red and black with plaid patterns on her design, a wide-brimmed fedora, and a red drink in her hand. At the top of the image are the words, "She's waiting." She said it would be a long time before we actually saw this character in the show, but that she was a looming threat in the distance, strongly indicating her in an antagonistic role. She also said that this character, Roo, aka the root of evil, was a personification of evil and worse than any other characters in the show, including Valentino. There's another old drawing showing her with her mouth open as her tongue turns into this eldritch abomination filled with eyes. If you look closely, you can see chains near the bottom of the drawing seemingly holding her down by her neck and arms. Both drawings also show her with blood dripping from her mouth. I can't source all of this because many of the posts are deleted, but you can check the description for the sources I do have. Anyways, more recently, VivziePop made a couple of posts on social media confirming that Roo is still canon, like a post expressing excitement about finally getting to record lines for her. We don't know how much of the old stuff about Roo still stands, but it's kind of all we got. We see a figure who is most likely supposed to be Roo in the intro sequence when Charlie mentions evil.
And shielded all from evil.
She's got a similar hair thing going on and the overall black aesthetic with the red eyes. It's also generally accepted by fans of the show that Roo and Eve are the same person, the root of evil. Or rather, that Roo is what Eve became after eating the apple. That is what the animation makes it look like, giving her the same black and red aesthetic and immediately shifting to imagery of these black claws and eyes everywhere, both of which are associated with Roo. It's also widely believed for this reason that Roo can control the eyes we see all over Hell. Also, she was mentioned once in Helluva Boss.
May the root of evil remain honored as we continue thy work!
Okay, now that the context is out of the way, we can get into the fun part. There's this theory first made by A. Lamau after the release of Season 1 that's gained increased popularity since the debut of Season 2. The theory goes that this Lilith we see in heaven is actually Roo disguised as Lilith, and the real Lilith is actually Rosie. Basically, according to this theory, at some point during the Morningstar's lives together, Roo took Lilith's place, assumed her identity, and forced her out of the picture. Lilith had little choice but to take on a new identity, forming her Rosie persona, until she could defeat Roo and return to her true self. This theory would explain a few things, like why Lilith suddenly wanted to isolate Charlie from Lucifer, or why Rosie acts almost motherly to Charlie and encourages her to sing. Post Season 2, most people can agree that there is more going on with Rosie than meets the eye, but I don't quite agree with the prominent theory. Instead, here's what I think. Roo is actually Rosie, and the Lilith we see here is real. Before I explain why, let's go over some issues I have with the Rosie is Lilith theory. I shouldn't have to say this, but no hate is intended on A. Lamau or anyone. In a nutshell, it feels out of character for both Lilith and Roo. If Rosie is actually Lilith, trying to help her daughter, why would she take such pleasure in controlling another soul? Lilith's whole thing is independence and free will, and here she is controlling somebody else? Engaging in the very behavior she once rebelled against? Making Lilith a hypocrite isn't a problem on its own, but doing so and trying to make her seem like the same loving mother and independent queen we see in the prologue would be inconsistent. I can imagine Lilith owning someone else's soul out of necessity, if Alistair were just too dangerous to be let free, or if she needed to use him in order to defeat Roo. But Rosie doesn't just do what she needs to keep Al on her leash. She doesn't keep him in a gilded cage. She controls his every move. She actively takes pleasure in tormenting him. Rosie's behavior is not consistent with the genuine Lilith, and if Lilith is doing all this to be manipulative, why is she taking a disguise at all? She would wield more power as herself than as Rosie. I've seen people point out that Rosie isn't as mean as she could be in Don't You Forget. That she's surprisingly chill. But I think those people are kind of missing the point of the scene. Rosie is the kind of person who will rip your heart out and crush it in her hands, smiling at you all the while. Remind you of anyone? Rosie and Alistair are actually incredibly similar in this way. Both are master manipulators, both use jokes and theatrics to remind their victims of how powerless they are, both have pretty good self-control and rarely get angry unless they're attempting to bully their victim back into submission. Alistair threatens Husk in Dad Be Dad because Husk brought up Alistair's own soul deal, something he's sensitive about. To Al, that's a sign that Husk needs a reminder of his place. Rosie, on the other hand, doesn't care that Alistair wants his freedom, or that he's getting tired of doing tasks for her. What does she care? As far as she knows, he's not gonna get his freedom without listening to her, so what reason does she have to feel worried? She doesn't have to do anything for him. He can bitch about his staff all he wants, she still doesn't have to fix it. She gets angry when he truly obtains his freedom, but it's more short-lived because they have bigger issues in the moment. She may not be making direct threats, but she is stripping Al of as much freedom as possible, telling him that the moves he makes are hers alone, and constantly comparing him to a caged animal. There are many words to imply that someone has to do what you say without actively comparing them to an animal. Servant, minion, helper, puppet. Those terms aren't great, but they're less insulting than pet. Yet the chorus is her telling him to sit, stay, roll over, go fetch, play ball, or play dead at her behest. She even makes him sing along just to add insult to injury, as well as suggesting that they've done this before. None of this feels in character for Lilith. Lilith lifted her people up. Rosie puts her subject down. I just cannot see a world where Lilith is trying to help her daughter and her kingdom, which is what this theory would imply, while also acting like this behind closed doors. Then there's a far bigger inconsistency with this theory. It's out of character for Roo. If it is true and this woman on the beach really is Roo in disguise, then why is she just chilling on a beach in heaven? I can see why Lilith might want a break from hell. She's human. Wanting a break from stress and hardship is a very human motivation. I don't think that's actually why she's there, which we'll get to, but it's a sensible motivation for a human person to have. Roo? Well, she might have once been sort of human, but now she's a personification of evil. From what little we know about her, she seems like a master puppeteer, pulling strings from behind the scenes, every move she makes part of some grand plan. I can only imagine she would want to be close to where her power is strongest. Hell, the realm of evil. Why the hell would an antagonist of Roo's status be content to just chill on a beach in solitude? In a series full of eccentric antagonists who actively seek power over others and enjoy causing pain, it feels weird to have the worst one of all just content with peace of mind. It could be, but I think it makes more sense for her to be actively hurtful. The only reason I can think of why Roo would go to heaven would be to manipulate Charlie and Lucifer by making them think Lilith abandoned them. But the Lilith we see here isn't scheming, nor would she need to be in heaven to suddenly go missing and elicit the same reactions. Then there's how Charlie turned out. This theory relies on the assumption that Roo took Lilith's place long before her disappearance, since Rosie has obviously been ruling Cannibal Town for longer than 7 years, meaning Roo raised Charlie for some amount of time, most likely isolating her from her father in order to mold her into the perfect puppet. Cool beans. But then, why did Charlie turn out the way she did? Lilith raised a woman who never gave up, who could pick herself up no matter how many times she fell, who would do anything for her people, who, yes, has a hole in her heart from her mother's abandonment, distance, and lack of advice, but still built a life for herself and is by no means dependent on mom's approval to continue doing so. These aren't the actions of a perfect monster making all the right moves to manipulate people she sees as chess pieces. Rather, those of a complicated, flawed woman trying her best under difficult circumstances. One last detail, I've noticed people bring up Lilith's eyes and the fact that we don't see her eyes outside of background pictures as further evidence for this theory, which does make sense when you think about it. Often in fictional stories, when a character takes the form of another, the eyes are the only thing that remain consistent. It's a noticeable enough detail that the audience can pick up on it, while also being subtle enough that we can suspend our disbelief and imagine that the characters wouldn't pick up on it, but I think the real reason her eyes are hidden is much simpler. They would betray her true emotions. The writers are obviously trying to keep Lilith's feelings a secret right now. Concealing her eyes is one of the most effective ways to do that. They're called the windows to the soul for a reason. It means we can't tell if she's worried or angry, disappointed or relieved, sorrowful or cold. Also, for what it's worth, in pictures from both Charlie's early childhood and well into her teen years, Lilith has the same lilac-colored eyes. So I don't think she'd have a different eye color now, even if she were Roo. Alright, now that we've dissected the prominent theory, let's get into what I actually think. I'm far from the only person to suggest this, but I wanted to lay out all the evidence. I think Rosie is Roo in disguise. Not only would it explain the issues with the previous theory, but as we said, there is clearly more going on with Rosie than meets the eye. For one, she and Zestial are the only overlords to stay out of Vox's rebellion. I would quickly raise an eyebrow at her telling Alistair she could make him the most powerful sinner in hell. Because what authority does she have to do that unless she herself is the most powerful sinner, or even stronger? That would be like Valentino saying he could make you the king of hell. Like, okay, Chief, with what power? She would have to be more powerful than what she gave Alistair to have granted him that power in the first place. She can't pass on power she doesn't have. Also, in the same scene, she calls Alistair a mortal soul, which kind of reminds me of how Adam called him a mortal soul. Clearly, sinners count as mortal souls, but Rosie is implying here that she isn't one. And it's not like she could be Hellborn, not when she looks so similar to a whole group of sinners. Side note, VivziePop has confirmed that the cannibals in Cannibal Town are sinners, not Hellborn, but didn't say anything about Rosie specifically. Since Roo obviously pre-existed humanity, she can't fully be a sinner by technicality, even if she's attached to a human soul. I also think Rosie contacting the living world is interesting. Some people have suggested that this is all Alistair's doing, that he just created a signal strong enough to get through to the other side. But something about that seems off? The whole thing about being a sinner is that you can't influence the living world no matter what. You're dead. It's over. That's your punishment. That's why people pay IMP to go to Earth for them. And Alistair doesn't have his powers yet. So, I'm sorry, I'm not buying that he just Ouija-boarded his way into contacting Hell. There must be something more going on here. So we've established that Rosie is more than she seems, and may not be a sinner. But how do we know she's Roo specifically? Well, for starters, there are her powers. Or, more accurately, Alistair's powers. You'll notice from the aforementioned eldritch monster that Roo's motifs include black limbs with large hands and sharp claws that appear eerily similar to some of Alistair's powers. Don't forget that Alistair got his powers from Rosie. Then there are Rosie's own powers, which, wouldn't you know it, have this same style. You may notice that her powers are golden, and if she's Roo, there's actually a perfect canon reason for this. She got her powers from something created by angels. The apple. While not all angels have golden magic, it's obviously a color associated with heaven. And that's not the only heavenly thing about her powers. We also see her teleporting with these light puffs of magic just like Lucifer does. And it makes sense when you think about it that she would have angelic power or an equivalent to it, since it is so much more potent than demonic power and thus a very easy way to make her a profound threat. At this point, you may be wondering what stops Rosie from being a fallen angel. I will admit that is a potent theory. Her being Roo is more likely for reasons I'm about to explain, but her being a fallen angel, maybe even this angel, seems like the second likeliest possibility. And I know many fans are used to the idea of Roo's powers being red, but we don't actually see her powers in action in these pictures, aside from this thing, which has several colors. And there's no reason why someone as powerful as Roo wouldn't be able to choose or change the color of their magic to, say, throw people off her trail. Especially if she was powerful enough to create this whole Rosie persona at all. Speaking of the Rosie mask, it makes sense that Roo, aka Eve, would take on this sweet, demure persona in an attempt to gain the trust of others. Think about her matchmaking and relationship counseling business, how compassionate she is towards Charlie, how formal and ladylike she acts, and how she basically admits in Don't You Forget that this is all a mask, calling herself an honest woman always there to lend an ear immediately before fucking with Al throughout the song. It really just feels like she's saying, "You'd threaten an honest woman? The woman who owns your soul?" It also makes this line,
Well, who hasn't thought about eating their first husband? I certainly would have if he didn't taste so bad.
really hilarious in context. Obviously, Eve's soft attitude wasn't a lie initially, but once she became Roo, they could both use Eve's personality to their advantage because they were one in the same. As a bonus, it also makes Alistair suffer even more, showing him how his faith in women and his understanding of them as these soft, docile creatures ended up biting him in the ass. Roo's appearance also has a few nods to Rosie, with a similar wide-brim fedora and a lust for blood, because let's be real, this drink is probably blood. As one last little nail in the coffin, in Hear My Hope, she calls Alistair a snake with clear disdain in her voice, which definitely feels like a nod to Eve being mad at the snake who told her to eat the apple. Alright, so we've established that at some point, Roo took on this Rosie persona to manipulate others. But why? What does she want? For that information, we're gonna have to go back to season 1, when Rosie forms a bond with Charlie. After helping Charlie with a relationship and building her confidence, Rosie watches her sing Ready for This, a song about Charlie forming her own identity as a ruler. Alistair remarks how her potential could be used for his own gain, and Rosie agrees. One small but voluminous detail is that Charlie starts the song holding Alistair's staff, to use as both a microphone and a token of leadership, but as she gains confidence, this is replaced with Rosie's scepter. The other thing you'll notice is that this song isn't really Charlie's victory. The cannibals agree to help because Alistair promises them flesh. There's some character development for Charlie as Susan stops undermining her, but they only agree to help because of what Alistair said. Even the singing, the part of the scene that is truly Charlie's own, didn't work because of anything she did. Rosie doesn't say some sappy shit like, "Darling, you've grown so much, embrace who you are and they'll see it." She says, "They'll listen if you sing. It'll work here."
It will work here. Trust me.
According to old live streams, the cannibals eat you on sight unless you have inside protection and or adopt their mannerisms, which apparently, according to Viv, includes bursting into a 1910-style song, at which point they'll ignore basic logic and accept you as one of them. Ready for This may not be quite 1910 style, but it isn't far off. Basically, Rosie is implying that singing will work because of a specific quirk of Cannibal Town and their ant colony behavior, not because it's a sign of Charlie's growth. Rosie and Alistair use this scene to manipulate Charlie by creating something that looks like her success, but is actually fully dependent on them, all while appearing supportive so Charlie trusts them for advice and guidance in the future. A dynamic that's implied to have worked for Rosie when we see that Charlie still has her business card. Despite the point of the song, it's clear that Charlie hasn't really come into her own yet. Even in the season 2 finale, her accomplishments are spearheaded by Emily. It was Emily's idea to save the sinners in the crossfire, which resulted in them trusting the girls and the hotel. Emily started the friendship fireball before Charlie joined in. I'm not saying Charlie isn't essential, but she hasn't taken the lead yet. She isn't acting like a ruler yet, which makes sense considering some of her colossal failures this season. Eventually, Charlie will think back to the only time she really appeared to succeed at coming into her throne, and will once again look to Rosie for help. Which is exactly what Rosie wants. Roo wants to use Charlie to control Hell. It's unclear what that means exactly, but I don't think it's a hot take to suggest that Roo wants complete power over Hell and probably Heaven, and that Charlie could be an extremely useful tool to serve that goal. One of the old doodles of Roo shows her with chains around her neck and arms, appearing to be holding her down. Regardless of who chained her down, this apparent limitation of her abilities means that she has to resort to manipulation to get what she wants. These chains don't necessarily mean that she is physically incapable of appearing to our characters or interacting with the story. They just mean that she is being held back somehow. Which would explain the need to take on this whole Rosie persona and use Charlie as an agent for her goals instead of just bulldozing whatever got in her way. It would explain her involvement and concern in the finale. She doesn't want to see Charlie and her friends die because she needs them alive for her plans. It wasn't genuine concern, hence this smile. This is not the face of someone thinking, thank goodness the girl I've grown so fond of isn't about to die. It's the face of someone thinking, there's the potential I saw in this little manipulator all those years ago. It's the face of someone who sees a kindred spirit in Alistair, a skilled manipulator, arranging the chess pieces to suit his needs. This is a knowing smile, impressed at how well he was able to play her game. Outwitting the root of evil isn't easy after all. It may seem out there for a mere sinner, but if anyone can do it, Alistair can. I also think the detail in Ready for This, when Charlie goes from using Alistair's staff to Rosie's scepter, indicates a progression. Like she's using Al as a stepping stone to get close to Charlie, which is probably why she made him go to the hotel in the first place. This part isn't necessary for the overall theory, but still has enough merit behind it that it's worth addressing. If Rosie is Roo, is Eve, that makes the already popular fan theory of Zestial being her son Cain way more interesting. As you probably already know, Cain and Abel are the sons of Adam and Eve, but Cain killed Abel. Since Abel is canon in Hazbin, it only makes sense that Cain would be too. What really set me on this bit of the theory was when Zestial and Rosie were shown to be the only overlords not to get involved in Vox's rebellion. And when a commenter pointed out to me that they both have the same skull symbol on their hats. Like, if they just both had skulls on their hats, I would let it slide, but it's the exact same fucking symbol!
Coincidence? I think not!
They also both have feathers in their hats. The main argument against this theory is that Zestial talks like a man from the 15 to 1600s specifically, not like a human from Eden. Adam and Abel are both shown to talk like they're from the 21st century. But here's the thing with that. Winners in heaven adapt. Because why wouldn't they? Heaven is generally perceived as a safe, welcoming place. There is nothing dangerous about walking the streets of heaven and talking and acting like anyone else. Adam and Abel both develop their own styles of dress based on their interests, but they don't have to commit to the bit because it's all fun and games. Hell is kill or be killed. Cain, like any other sinner, must make himself look intimidating if he wants to survive. Lilith kept her old identity because there's no rule saying sinners have to reinvent themselves, but it does seem like the thing most of them do, usually not even keeping the same names from their lives on Earth. And Cain's great accomplishment of hitting his brother in the head with a rock probably didn't secure him much comfort or safety among arms dealers and cult leaders who eat that shit for breakfast. So in order to survive, or maybe at his mother's behest, Cain adopted this overlord persona that made him look older and scarier and more mysterious than the others, so no one would dare challenge him. He's been around for all of human history, so it's not like it'd be hard to craft a convincing persona from any specific time period. He changed the persona every couple centuries to keep things moderately realistic and so no one was around long enough to catch on, until he reached his Zestial form, where we are today. It may seem far-fetched on paper, but we already know most sinners reinvent themselves in hell, we already know Zestial is notably ancient, and thanks to that damn skull, we already have reason to believe he's connected to Rosie, whom we have very good reason to believe is Roo. If his mother took on this strategy, why wouldn't he? I've seen some Helluverse fans suggest that we might not ever see Cain in the show, since according to religious text, his punishment was to wander the earth alone, and we don't know if he ever got an afterlife. But that strikes me as the kind of detail writers could easily change. Cain has already been referenced. In an interview, Abel is said not to be the favorite child, and in Hear My Hope, Abel sings that he's not Adam's bravest son. Unless the show explicitly mentions Cain being a wanderer on Earth, the possibility of him being in Hazbin will remain on the minds of many, especially as we dive deeper into Eden, and never addressing it would be underwhelming and easily avoidable. Well, that's about it for part 1 of my huge-ass Helluverse theory. In summary, Rosie is Roo in disguise. We know this from their designs, how powerful Rosie is indicated to be, and how she demonstrates the intention to control Charlie. With that, let me know what you think in the comments. What is Roo planning? Has she taken a secret form, and have we seen it in the show? Is she Rosie or Lilith or someone else? Can't wait to hear your thoughts. In part 2, we'll go over Lucifer and Lilith's breakup, the exterminations, the real reason Lilith is in heaven, and finally, Alistair's disappearance. See you then. If I could record just one time without my nose getting unreasonably itchy, that would be wonderful.